Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the New York Post. This one is dated, where did it go? It is August 6th, and of course, ads are popping up all over the place, and we're going to scroll down once again. It says, Miranda Devine, who is the author of the article right here, says, Biden abused his authority by turning FEMA into a far-left political machine, but I think we already knew that, given after the hurricane, they were saying stuff like, hey, we're not going to give aid to anybody with a Trump sign in their yard. So let's get into it. And before we do that, though, is it really surprising that the Biden administration was as corrupt as the Obama one? I mean, really? So it says the Biden administration abused its power by turning the entire mechanism of the federal government into a Democratic voter mobilization campaign, according to newly unearthed White House documents viewed exclusively by the Post. The worst offender was FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, under the Department of Homeland Security, which was controlled for 4 years by Biden's Machiavellian border buster Alejandro Mayorkas. And that dude, why has that dude not been arrested for something, like human trafficking, given what was happening at the border? Can we not do something about that? It says, when responding to an emergency or natural disaster, FEMA employees were directed to make voter registration a key priority. Yes, because that's the most important thing. Never mind the fact that there are people dying or missing or, homes have been destroyed and everything. But let's make sure that they know to vote, right? Says they politically targeted vulnerable people in their hour of need instead of focusing on providing federal assistance. Right, yeah, that's what I just said. The left-wing NGOs were brought in to educate FEMA staff about equity and voter access for individuals affected by the disaster, says a Trump administration official. Equity, so communism. It says FEMA's job is to make sure Americans who have suffered catastrophic loss due to some disaster in their community can access food, water, and shelter. Under President Biden, FEMA, like every agency, produced a plan on how they would leverage these crisis situations for political purposes. I can't think of anything more disgusting. Yeah, that's an awful thing. Their job is to help people. It is not to make sure that they are signed up to vote. Okay, when they get back on their feet, let them go do that then, if they're not already registered. So it says FEMA snubbed GOP, which shouldn't be surprised. It says FEMA employees were so fixated on voter outreach that when they visited hurricane-ravaged Florida last October, they didn't even bother knocking on the doors of houses that had Trump signs in the yard, as I said earlier, and this must be why they didn't do it. It was because they were focused on things that were not emergency-related. And I remember people were wondering about that, and, well, we have our answer. It says instead of assisting Hurricane Milton survivors, they were instructed to avoid homes advertising Trump, according to an Office of Special Counsel complaint. FEMA supervisor Marnie Washington was fired as a scapegoat after Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis called foul on the scam, and the Daily Wire reported that at least 20 homes with Trump signs or flags had been skipped by FEMA and denied the opportunity of qualifying for federal assistance. It stands to reason that if FEMA's priority was getting out Democrats to vote, the last people they would want to visit were Trump supporters. Says the Florida scandal came on the heels of the Biden administration's sluggish response to Hurricane Helene and Trump supporting rural areas of North Carolina and Tennessee. Whether it was Hurricane Helene, the Maui wildfires, Hurricane Ian, or the East Palestine train derailment in Ohio, FEMA always came up short during the Biden years. And again, I think we know why now. Let me just scroll down. Okay, so there is going to be more. It says, the agency's inadequate performance is more understandable when you realize that providing actual disaster relief to victims had become simply a side dish to the partisan political priorities of the Democratic Party. It says, it began the minute Joe Biden came into office when he concocted a fake voter registration crisis by leveraging the same racial discord that he had exploited during the George Floyd riots the previous summer, claiming that many Americans, especially people of color, confront significant obstacles to exercising the fundamental right to vote, including difficulties with voter registration, lack of election information, and barriers to access to polling places. It is amazing to me how Democrats think minorities are retarded. They're not, okay? Jesus Christ. It reminds me, there's a video, I think it's on PragerU, of Ami Horowitz interviewing left-wingers, and they're all like, yeah, it's racist to have voter ID, black people don't know what to do, and they don't know what they need to do this or that. And then Ami Horowitz, you can get registered at the post office. He goes into Harlem, and the first person he asks is hey man, where's the post office to register to vote? And the guy's like, oh yeah, it's right over there. It's I mean, this is actual racism, folks. This just annoys the shit out of me. Anyway, let's continue on. It says this was not true. In fact, voter turnout in the 2020 election of 67% was the highest recorded in the 21st century, according to the Census Bureau. Voter registration likewise was at a record high in 2020. Equity and access were euphemisms for policies designed simply to increase Democratic voter turnout by targeting demographics that traditionally vote Democratic. Yep, that's what it was. It says Biden launched his federal government-wide voter recruitment platform with an executive order on March 7th, 2021 to promote equity in voter access. It says the date was chosen deliberately to fall on the 56th anniversary of Bloody Sunday to invoke the civil rights legacy of fighting voter suppression against black Americans. It says Biden announced the scheme at a breakfast in Selma, Alabama. Jesus Christ. So we're going with we're gonna hook it to every historical thing. It says assertedly tying the January 6th Capitol riot to what he claimed was a renewed struggle for voting rights. Yeah, there's not stop. They have no problems voting. No minority does. Okay, it happens the same way it does to anybody else. Just knock it the hell off. So it says Fed turnout machine. A federal lawsuit filed by 9 states last August claimed that his order was drafted by progressive racial activist group Demos, which monitors implementation and advocates that federal agencies do more. So are you surprised that a radical leftist group or a progressive racial group, activist group got in there and did this? Nope. Says the EO was executed by Susan Rice, Biden's assistant to the president for domestic policy, whose primary focus was making equity central to every arm of government. And Susan Rice is someone that, if you don't know who that name is, she might be one of the most destructive individuals that's ever been in government, and she should never be allowed anywhere near the levers of power. She's an actual evil human being. In 2021, she commanded all federal agencies to dream up ways to re-engineer their activities to prioritize voter turnout, especially in marginalized communities. The Department of Energy, for example, targeted low-income households that qualify for federal weatherization assistance with voter registration paraphernalia before the 2022 midterm elections. Because I'm sure, the Department of Energy really is yeah, we should definitely help with that. And same thing here I was going to say with the Department of Labor. It said they enlisted state workforce agencies to designate American job centers as voter registration agencies and coordinating exclusively with leftist voting rights groups. So it was all just skewed to one side. This is not good. Says the Department of Health and Human Services instructed federal health centers to engage in voter turnout, including encouraging patients to register to vote, assisting patients with completing registration forms, sending completed forms to the election authorities. HHS also encouraged voter registration by ineligible illegal aliens who had access to health coverage through the Affordable Care Act, according to an expose by Heritage Foundation senior legal fellow Hans Van Spakovsky. DHS went above and beyond. There's a FEMA strategic plan for the implementation of Executive Order 14019, promoting access to voting, dated September 10th, 2021, and sent to Rice by Catherine Culitin Gonzalez, says DHS Officer for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, summarized what DHS was doing to comply with Biden's EO by using disasters and emergencies to harvest voters. DHS has planned and begun implementing a variety of internal and external activities to promote access to voting. Says the plan included key messaging and resources to promote equity and voter access through their training, preparedness initiatives for individuals impacted by a disaster or emergency event. Also included were novel ways of harassing internal resources and points of public interface to promote equity in voter access before, during, and after a disaster or emergency event. So yeah, they went through the entire government and said everybody's going to do this, and I don't think it worked out in 2024. So good job, guys. So it says registration drive for this section. Another arm of Mayorkas' empire, the Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, was enlisted for the turnout effort, with a plan to build up its existing efforts to facilitate voter registration for new citizens at the end of naturalization ceremonies in coordination with governmental and non-governmental organizations. At 2100, or at 2000, what is that? For a minute I got tripped up by the number there. I'm an idiot. At 2,100 naturalization ceremonies for new Americans, DHS embedded voter registration outreach, inserting 2 million voter registration forms in welcome packets and inviting only partisan left-leaning groups. Yep, you can see how that might be a problem. There's another White House document covering partnerships and outreach showed that DHS signed memorandums of understanding with the League of Women Voters in October 22 and NALEO Educational Fund in February 2023 for naturalization ceremony support. So they're hiding it under all these other things. So there's another DHS outfit, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I've heard of them, the CISA, C-I-S-A. I've done videos where they've appeared before. So they co-hosted Your Vote, Your Voice cyber hygiene webinars. Cyber hygiene? Okay. With another NGO, the Chicago-based Center for Tech and Civic Life. Says taxpayer resources allocated by DHS for voter turnout in 2022 to 2024 included 12 full-time USCIS employees, $1.9 million in print contracts, and costs absorbed for a dedicated 5-person team from FEMA's Individual and Community Preparedness Division. President Trump issued a new executive order in March this year to reverse Biden's subterfuge, which, thank God he did that, calling on every federal agency to ensure the voter outreach schemes are dismantled, and hopefully they're following up on that, and they are dismantled. Says the cost of this Sovietization of the federal government is incalculable. Yes, as I said, communism. But let's hope FEMA and the other agencies can get back to their day jobs, and that is the end. So, what do you think about that? So Biden, this man here, wasn't this man, it was the people working for him because he was a vegetable. But what do you think about this? This is pretty crazy, huh? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.